All right. Well, thanks, Liz, and welcome everyone. I have started recording this event. Thank you everyone for joining our AARP New Hampshire webinar with the Creative Feast. My name is Frances Donahue and I'm your host today. I'm also a volunteer with AARP New Hampshire. The recording for today's virtual event will be available in a few days at https://www.youtube.com. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. We welcome your questions, and my fellow volunteers, Mary and Ashley and I will be addressing them periodically throughout this demonstration. They will also be putting in links for the recording, the web address for Liz's recipes, and information on the cooking class throughout this demonstration. Today, Liz will show us how to make both a breakfast and dinner sheet pan recipe. The recipes can be found at Cooking Along Classes, Liz Barber's Creative Feast, thecreativefeast.com. This event is part of a series with the Creative Feast, which focuses on food and its impact on healthy living. AARP has been promoting health and the well-being of older Americans for over 60 years. In New Hampshire, AARP works to bring you informative, innovative, and fun virtual events like today's online cooking along demonstration as a means of connection and inclusion. AARP has numerous free healthy living resources on its website, which include staying fit, wellness, and longevity, information on healthy eating, as well as staying sharp. There's something for everyone out there. So we'll put the link to that. We'll put the link to that in our chat. So Chef Liz has built her career in various Boston catering and restaurant venues. After starting her family, she re-entered the food world as a cooking instructor and developed Liz Barber's Creative Feast. Chef Liz has appeared on New Hampshire's WMUR Cook's Corner. Her cooking demonstrations and recipes and herb gardens have been featured in various publications, including Where Women Cook, New Hampshire Magazine, the Nashua Telegraph, and the Hippo Press. All her programs focus on the premise that we are healthier when we cook at home. We hope you enjoy today's program. Liz, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Frances. Welcome, everybody, to my kitchen studio here in Hollis, New Hampshire. I'm so glad that you could join me today for our monthly cook-along programs. I am going to take you to the website so you can see where you can find my recipe, and I know the ladies are going to be popping the links into the website for you, or into the chat for you. So why don't we do that first, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about our topic today, which I know all of you will enjoy. Let's see. Oops. So let's go right over to Liz Barber's Creative Feast. And this is where you can find all the recipes for today and many more. If you go over to where it says Food and Fun on the recipe blog, I've actually created pages here just for AARP. You can see we go all the way back to 2023. Excuse me. And so you're just going to click on this year, and then you can scroll down and you're going to see the dates of our classes and the links to the recipes. So obviously this month we're talking about sheet pan meals. We're going to do a breakfast and a dinner. And then if you join us again in May, we're going to do how to bake the best fruit pie. There's only one recipe here, but it includes both the crust and the filling. It's going to be a great class. It's one of my favorites to teach. And then I'll be updating all the way down. So we're meeting again in June, July, September, October, November, and December. So those classes will be up shortly. But today we are going to be focusing on our sheet pan meals. If you want to explore my website a little bit more, here at the recipe blog is where you'll find all kinds of recipes, including many more sheet pan meals. If you go here on the right-hand side, you see my topics. And there we have a listing for sheet pan meals. And There are many here that you may not have tried before, but they're all very simple and they've got some great photographs. And I even have a guide for you on, how to do a sheet pan meal. So that sheet pan meal tips. So I would recommend that you read through that a little bit more so that you can create your own sheet pan meals. You don't have to stick to a recipe that I have. You can go ahead and it gives you, a lot of information on how you could do this on your own. So I found that very, very helpful. But let's start off by talking about sheet pan meals in general. So the concept is really simple, and that is that it's like a one pot meal, only you're doing it in your oven. And the advantages of doing it in your oven is that you you're you can explore the uses of high heat in creating more flavor in your food, giving you some wonderful color in your food. And again, it's just a one pan meal. Now, I know for sure that this is a really great option because about 2 months ago, my husband retired and he's, lived for 30 something years, 33 years, and where he's had his few recipes that he enjoys making, and I appreciate every time he cooks too. Now I am busier than he is, and so he wanted to start cooking, and so I suggested that he try these sheet pan meals. I bought him a book. There are many out there. You can find them at your library. You can go online to find information. Of course, you can go to my website. And so he started experimenting with the sheet pan meals and he loved it because it was just so simple and it really prepared, enough for the two of us, maybe with one or two meals as a leftover. But it got him to explore the idea of putting different parts of the meal together all on one sheet pan. And the instructions do let you know that oftentimes with a sheet pan meal, you're going to start one part of the meal first on the sheet pan, cook it for a period of time, take it out, and add the next part of the meal onto the sheet pan, and then they will finish together. So we're going to do that in both of our recipes today. Let's just take just a second. We're going to be doing our fish dish and our with potatoes, and I want to get those going. And then we're going to be doing our breakfast, which is a puff pastry, croque madame, and so very simple. But I'd like to, before we get too far in the weeds, I'm going to go ahead and get our potatoes started because we do have a timing issue. And so we're going to dive right into this idea of splitting up your dish into two different timings. So I'm going to put my fish aside for now. And my ingredients for my breakfast. And we're just going to focus right now on our potatoes. Now, we are going to obviously be using a sheet pan. So depending on the size, the amount that you're cooking, you will change the size of your sheet pan. I have smaller ovens. I'm just grabbing some sheet pans here just to show you the difference in size. So this is typically what you would call a half sheet pan. You may have plenty of these in your house. And then this one you can see is the sheet pan that I use in my oven, which is smaller, right? If you have a lot of food that you're going to create, of course, you will split that between two sheet pans. And you can cook them both at the same time, but you want to make sure that you give them plenty of room in the oven so that they're not sitting on racks directly on top of each other. You kind of want to give them some air so that the air can circulate around your sheet pans. Now, you don't have to use a sheet pan like this. If you have a round sheet pan that you want to use, you can use that. But the goal is to use your sheet pan as a tool for you. So we're going to cook the things that take the longest will go on the outside of the sheet pan, and the food that takes the shortest amount of time will go on the inside of the sheet pan. Now, when we place our sheet pans in the oven, we're going to be, I always use the convection setting because it blows the hot air over and under the pan. So it circulates around the pan like that. And that gives you the best kind of heating for your meal because it will blast that hot air. You'll notice that most of your sheet pan meal recipes are between, put it in the oven at temperatures of between 400 degrees and 450 degrees, nice and hot. And you're going to take advantage of that because when we have a cooking surface that's more of a surface, it cooks in a shorter amount of time, especially when you get that air circulating. If you've never used your convection setting before, this is the time to do it. And people say, oh, it'll cook that much faster. Don't worry, the recipes have taken that into account. Like I said, I use my convection setting all the time, and I find that the timing of the recipes is just perfect. Now, if you have concerns about that, keep an eye on it and check, every few minutes to just see how it's doing. So this is the sheet pan I'm using. We're going to start our potatoes. So we're making a fish and chips in the oven, which I love because I don't like to deep fry. I don't like to use a lot of oil. And I just have never been comfortable with deep frying. So we're going to be getting our potatoes ready for this. This is the chips part. So we want to make sure we season it. I am using baking potatoes here. They are very starchy and dry. And so they tend to cook without as much, they don't have as much water in them. So they tend to cook a little bit faster, but also because they're so starchy, they're going to crisp up a little bit more for you. Now you'll notice again, I'm just peeling these, and I know that if you have questions, you can put them into the chat and Frances will interrupt me with your questions. So feel free to go ahead and get asking. I've got my oven preheating at 425 degrees with the convection setting on it. And I've got my tray, my racks set up, one at the bottom and one in the middle. Okay, because I'm going to be cooking two things at one time. So I want to have that space. Now, just so you know, I am only making half of the recipe for each of these items. And you can certainly it's easy to cut your recipes in half or to double them if that's what you want to do. But I've cut mine in half, so that's why I'm using only 2 of these potatoes. All right, and then I'm going to cut it in wedges. Frances, please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions from the audience.
Someone just said, is it true that if you cut your pieces into whatever you're cooking, if you cut it into smaller pieces rather than larger pieces, it cooks better and at the same time?
Yes. So, but what we're doing here is we are cutting these into wedges, right? So we want to make sure like this wedge would take much longer to cook than this wedge, right? Because of the thickness of it. So we want to cut these into wedges. If you wanted to go even thinner, you can do that. But I have found with this recipe that just cutting each half into 4 pieces is perfect. Yes, if you wanted to cut these into small cubes, you could certainly do that as well. It's just a different way of doing it. But you don't want these. You want to be you don't want these touching on your sheet pan. So you want to be able to be sure that you spread them out. Now, another trick that I'm going to do that is mentioned in the recipe, and I always do this if I am going to oven roast or oven, quote unquote, fry my potatoes, is to dry them off, because drying them off helps to pull away the moisture and allow for more of a crispier finish. And this is a little trick that I learned from my Italian brother-in-law, who makes the best roasted potatoes, always very crisp in the oven. And so you just take a cotton towel and dry them off. Okay. Now, if you wanted to cut these in advance, you can do that. Just remember, you want to soak them in water. Keep them in water so they don't turn brown until you're ready to cook with them. However, that will then remove some of the starch, which again will affect the crispiness of your potatoes. So all of these things, you just want to keep that in mind. So now we have our potatoes. They're dry. And we're going to pop them into our bowl. And then we're going to get our seasoning. Just hang my towel here. So we want some real flavorful potatoes. And I really have loved this seasoning combination. And when you love a combination like this, why not just make a big container of the seasoning? You can use it for anything. So what we have here is we have some garlic powder. We have some onion powder now remember, I'm cutting this in half, so it's about a teaspoon of each. If you were doubling it, if you were doing it as the recipe calls, it would be 2 teaspoons of each. Salt and pepper to taste. I think I used about half a teaspoon of salt and a quarter teaspoon of pepper, again, for half the recipe. And then we have some sweet paprika. Okay, if you want to use smoked paprika, you can do that too. That's just going to have a lot more flavor in it. And it's going to have that smoky flavor that would probably in this dish be a little bit overpowering for what we're looking for. So I've gone ahead and mixed all of these together. Oh, it's just so much easier to get in there with my hands. And I have about 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil. And I'm just going to mix those together. Always use olive oil. We're done using canola oil. We're done using vegetable oils. We're going to use olive oil. If you wanted to use an extra virgin olive oil, you could too. Those other oils are very inflammatory and really not healthy overheated. I think we've all seen that recently in the news. So we want to pay attention to that. All of that information is coming out that these highly processed oils are just not good for us. So we want to stick to the olive oil. Okay. So now we've got our potatoes all seasoned up. And again, we're doing this in our first step, right? We want to, because the potatoes will actually take overall about 25 minutes to 30 minutes to cook. So we're getting them started this way. We've got our pan. I've got them seasoned up, and I'm going to put them on their side. And they're going to go all around the edges of the pan. So this is a key thing that I mentioned earlier. You want to put the ingredients that are going to take the longest to cook on the outside edges of your pan, so that when that heat comes up and around the pan, it will hit, this high temperature will hit these items for the longest period of time. Okay. Now, I'm just going to make sure that I've got plenty of room here for our fish. These potatoes are just a little bit big. We can move them around. There we go. Okay. Not too crowded. It all depends on the size of your potato, doesn't it? Okay, and there we go. Now this is half the recipe. Okay, it's just my husband and myself. Easy to split in half. I will tell you that I made this on Monday night or Tuesday night, and I just finished the last of the leftovers today, and they were just as delicious as that first day that I made them. Now this is going to go into my 425-degree oven, and I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes. So let me just pop that in there, and I see that we have a pan in here, so we're going to set that to the side. And this one I am putting on the bottom of my oven, because the bottom will tend to be warmer. I happen to have a pizza stone in there, so it'll sit on there, so it'll help to heat up the bottom of that pan. It's not completely necessary, but I'm putting it at the bottom because I know we're going to be adding a second pan in there with our puff pastry for the coque madame. Okay, so I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes and going to get that all set. And what I want to do is I want to have my fish ready for that when that comes out. So let's get started on, let's see, do we want to do that? Let's just get started on this fish, and then we'll go ahead and work with our coque madame. So The fish, I am using scrod, okay, as is typical for your uh your fried fish and chips. We also have we're going to be dipping that in egg, and we are seasoning our egg. We have our flour here that we're going to be seasoning. And then we also have our breadcrumbs. Now remember, we're going to make fish and chips. We want the fish to have a crispy coating as well, but we're not deep frying. So this is where some cleverness comes in handy from the original recipe designer. So I'm going to take this over to the stove. And again, Francis, if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to stop me, and I'm happy to answer them.
We do
Um,
actually have some questions.
okay, go right ahead.
So they were asking about when you said to use the olive oil. There was a
Mhm.
question as, doesn't olive oil burn not to use it because it burns at a high heat? Or can you use avocado oil instead?
You can. However, um, from what I have read, that information is not necessarily the case. So would I deep fry in olive oil? No, I wouldn't, because that's going to get at a very high temperature. But olive oil can actually be stable at a higher temperature than we have been told. So in any case that I have been doing here, we're cooking something at 425 degrees in the oven. Olive oil is just fine. Could you use avocado oil? Yes, you can, because that is a less processed oil, and it comes from the fruit of the avocado and not necessarily from the seed. So um, you can use avocado oil. It's a great option. Another oil that you could use is a coconut oil if you'd like. That is another great option. I'm just saying, I guess the point I want to make is stop using canola oil, stop using highly processed seed oils, anything that says vegetable oil. Those are not oils that we should be using. Now, I just chopped up my garlic for this. We're going to go back to the stove, and I hope I answered that question for you. Here we're
And
going to
also,
brown. Let me just get this going. We're going
yep.
to brown our breadcrumbs. That's how we're going to mimic this deep frying effect, and it's going to be really flavorful. So over a moderate heat, I've got my olive oil, and I'm going to go ahead and cook up my garlic. So go right ahead, honey. I'm listening.
Okay. Didn't mean to interrupt you. So they're
That's
asking,
okay.
will it taste different if you use like avocado oil or rather than olive oil or any other oil?
You're not going to notice the difference. I mean, olive oil will add a little bit more flavor to it. Certainly an extra virgin olive oil would, but I honestly, there's so much seasoning on that, you're not going to taste a difference. So a neutral oil would be fine in this case. I personally use olive oil.
And there was a question about the convection oven. Sorry to keep bothering you, but
That's
so
okay.
like everybody says, the recipe says preheat to 425. If you're using your convection oven, it's going to drop it down to 400. So do they heat to 450 so it drops to 425, or do they heat to 425 and let it drop to 400?
So, okay, if you want to be literal, I would drop it down. So the oven itself, I'm trying to figure out how I can explain this. The convection part means that your food will cook in less time if at the higher temperature, because the convection is helping to move that hot air. So if you're concerned, you can drop it down to 400 and cook it for the full time. Personally, I leave it. I cook it at 425. I cook it for the time that it says on the recipe, and my food comes out just fine. Now, always take into effect that you may have a brand new convection oven and it cooks at a really high heat. So you might want to drop that temperature down natural anyway. So experiment with it. The idea is that, okay, so if it says for 15 minutes, check your stuff after 10 minutes. See how it's doing. You may say, oh my gosh, this is I don't even have to worry about that. I have personally, even when I bake, I never change the temperature for convection, because there's also convection bake on your oven as well. There are different settings. So it's something to, learn about your oven. What is the best cooking temperature for your oven? Okay, I've just got my garlic going just a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and add, these are panko breadcrumbs. And I love these because they are nice and they have a nice texture to them. And we're going to watch as they turn a lovely light brown. You can add a little bit of thyme in there, a little bit of salt and pepper if you want. My husband bought ground thyme by mistake, but I'm going with it, and I'm going to find all different ways to use ground thyme. So it is so fun to work with a relatively new cook, and I had to take him on a whole tour of the kitchen to show him where I keep everything, and he has some great questions that, because it's been my kitchen for 25 years, I'm used to where everything is. So we're he's finding out all kinds of hidden places, and I have a feeling we're going to be changing things around just so they make sense to both of us. So that's a fun thing to be thinking about. All right, now I've got my egg dip that we're going to do. Now, when we dip our oh, I'm sorry, this is with some Dijon mustard, about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard and a tablespoon of mayonnaise, and then 1 egg. Now, you don't have to do that. This is plenty flavorful without it. Just so you know, the first time I made it, I just didn't do it, so that I could taste the difference. But whatever you like, this is a very wonderfully flavorful dish. So I'm just gonna mix that all together. Now, you can do the fish, coat it well in advance, because it's not just a flour coating, it's got those breadcrumbs on them, on the fish pieces. So you could really prep that up, earlier in the day, stick it in the refrigerator, and then when it's time to cook it, you could cook it that way if you are looking for ways to save time. So we've got about, again, I'm doing half the recipe. So we have about 10 ounces of fish here. I've got 2 fillets. This one has the tail on it, but it's super thin. So what I do is I tuck the tail under, and now I have a thicker fillet. So that's a really fun tip. This is the loin of the cod. And so that's going to be a little bit denser. Depending on how thick your cod is, it should take between 10 and 15 minutes to cook once it goes back into the oven. So I am checking on my breadcrumbs here. Oh, perfect. Look at how beautifully brown they are. So I'm going to go just a little bit longer. Now, if you wanted to replace the olive oil in this with butter, you could also do that. Keep that in mind. We're just minutes away from that. And so I'm going to set these aside. We will coat them in a few minutes. And I'm going to go ahead, and I want to just wipe off this cutting board, because we are going to be working with our puff pastry. And for those of you who were curious about that, it is one of my favorite things to buy already made. I personally have never made puff pastry, but of course I've watched it being made, and it's very labor intensive, and you use a lot of butter, et cetera, which you would in the purchased. So it's a labor of love, and if you have the time and the inclination, I always recommend you do it yourself. But this Pepperidge Farm product I have been using for years and years and years, and I've always found it to be very reliable, easy to get. The package comes with 2 sheets in it. So I'm just going to be I'm doing this recipe, half a recipe, so I'm just going to be using 1 sheet, and I'm going to show you how to unwrap that. And I'm just going to grab some flour. I realized that I didn't have extra flour here, so I'm just going to grab a little bit of that to have on our work surface.
Liz,
All
we
right,
got a
so
couple questions.
yes.
So can you use parchment paper on your pan when you cook this, or would you not recommend it?
I wouldn't. And the reason why, okay, so we have our beautiful breadcrumbs here just so you can see how gorgeous they are. I'm just gonna let them cool down a minute. And I'm gonna go ahead, ladies, and I'm going to turn off this camera, or maybe you can turn it off for me because we don't need the one over the stove anymore. So we can take that off completely if you want to just remove that. Great.
I did.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to let this just sit for a minute. So remind me again, the question was,
One question was parchment paper. Another one
yes.
is fish. What would you use? You're using cod, but if you lived on the West Coast, what would you use? And also this egg dip that you're using, could you use it on other things like shrimp? And can you use tilapia in this recipe? Too many at one time? I'll go back over them.
No. That's good. Okay, so yes, you can use the tilapia. That's a really wonderful substitute. What we're looking for is a firmer white fish, right? So tilapia would be fine. And scrod is fine here. I don't know what other white fish would be perfect on the West Coast because I'm just not as familiar with those fish. But what you're looking for is a firm white fish. That's what you're looking for. Okay. And then the other question was, remind me again. I got caught
It
up.
was, would you use this dip, this Dijon dip
Ah,
that could you use it on shrimp or
sure.
anything like that? What
Sure.
else would
Yep.
you use it
Yep.
on?
It's going to be flavorful. You could use it for chicken. You could use it for pork. You could, anything that requires an egg dip, you can use this. It's going to be very flavorful. And then, of course, with these breadcrumbs, they're going to help make that fish a little bit sturdier. Okay. So that is and then the fact that we've already browned them is perfect because we don't need them to brown now. We just need that fish to cook through. And then we've given that, we eat a lot with our eyes, right? So we expect when something comes out of the deep fryer, it's going to be nice and browned, right? Well, this is already brown and it's fully flavorful. So you're not going to miss the fact that this hasn't been fried. This has been roasted in the oven. And that is kind of a little bit of a trick for you. I just floured my surface. I'm setting this aside because I can tell that our potatoes are going to be done in just a few minutes. So I'm going to kind of go back to our fish dish so that I can get this breaded and then we'll have it ready for the oven. So let's just take a second to do that. And let me just put my parchment on my cutting board, on my board over there. So we have our seasoned and browned breadcrumbs. We have our seasoned egg dip, and then we have just plain flour. Okay. And so it's going to be very simple. Dip it in the flour. I always get rid of excess flour. Dip it in my egg mixture. Look at how gorgeous that is. Very flavorful. And then I'm going to go ahead and dip it into my breadcrumbs. Now the breadcrumb mixture I use the full recipe for this because I think my fillets are a little bit bigger, but I found that the breadcrumb mixture is plenty. Okay, so there is one, beautiful. I'm going to put that over here. And then my second, and that's super easy. That's probably one of the easiest recipes that you'll have. It can't go wrong here, especially when you've got good flavor and good color. Okay, so get that egg mixture on there and get my breadcrumbs ready and just dip that in. Okay, there goes my buzzer. I'm going to pull out my potatoes because I want you to see they're essentially cooked halfway through because remember, with the sheet pan meal, we can break it in half, cooking time, so that we make sure that it's all completed together. Okay, so let's take out our potatoes. And you can see that they've already started to brown, which is perfect. I'm going to move these off. And we've got our space in the middle here. Now, if you wanted to, you could turn your potatoes over. I just really cooked them all the way through and just wait to the end. They tend to, now they're a little bit stuck, but if I wait until the end and take them off, I can just take them off with a spatula and they'll come away nice and clean, because the roasting will help to release them. Okay, so in goes one piece of scrod. Oops, these are a little bit big. I'm gonna move this over here. And here is our second piece of scrod. Now, there are many recipes that also will include your main protein, some kind of a starch, baby potatoes or something, and some vegetables in it. So you might, I would use a bigger pan, or in my case, 2 pans, and then you could do roasted broccoli on this if you wanted to. That would go on at the same time as your fish. Maybe you could drop it right on top here. Just make sure that it's got plenty of olive oil on it. That's one of the tips that I give for sheet pan meals, is if you're cooking vegetables, you want to make sure that they do have olive oil on them, so that they don't dry out. So lots of information there. So this is going to go back in the oven, all right? And then we're going to let that continue to cook. And I'm going to set my timer for another 15 minutes. Okay, so that is all set. That is a 2-part cooking time, and the same with the coque mesdames. So here we have our surface with a little bit of flour, and down goes, this is our thawed, want to make sure that you thaw it, puff pastry. And we're going to go ahead and take our rolling pin. Now, what I've done, we just want this to be a square because we're going to cut this into 4 pieces. And if you're doing the full recipe, you're going to do 2 sheets and you're going to cut them each into 4 pieces. So it's about 10 inches wide. And here it's a little short. So I'm going to just roll this out from top to bottom just to get myself another 1/2 inch so that it is square. And there we go. And then we're going to take our, I'm just going to take a pizza cutter and I lay my ruler right there and I cut about 5 inches straight on through and then cut that in half. Oops, we'll do it this way. Perfect. Okay. Simple, right? Okay, now puff pastry. If I were to cook it just like this, it would all puff up into a big puffy pillow, right? What we want to do is we're going to cook something on top of it. So we're going to place this onto our baking sheet, and notice I do have my don't you hate it when the word slips out of your mind?
Parchment paper.
Parchment paper, thank you. And in order to keep this from fully puffing up, I'm going to take a fork and I'm going to just poke the center of it like you would when you're blind baking a pie. And that will help the center to not puff up as much. Okay, so right in the center. Okay, and now we're going to take 1 egg and mix it with a teaspoon of water. And we are going to go ahead and add an egg wash to it. This is going to give it a beautiful color while it's baking. And this is going to be lovely. Now, if you wanted to do this, we're doing ham and cheese. You could change the cheese. If you're not a Gruyere fan, you could do cheddar with it. You could do feta cheese if you wanted to. That would be very nice. There, there's no end to the possibilities of doing this. And we're just going to go right into the middle, all around the edges. There we go. Now, this recipe also allows you to do your ham and cheese. So I have Black Forest ham, and I found that if I just put that right on top with some of the crust exposed, that was fine. Now my ham slices, I had them cut very thin. You can cut whatever texture you want, but that allows me to put, I'm going to put 2 slices of ham on here. But they're very thinly sliced. I just, in general, like my whole cuts thin sliced. And this is a beautiful Black Forest ham, but of course you can use any ham that you like. It's going to brown up very nicely in the oven. Now we have shredded Gruyere. Swiss cheese is a very nice substitute if you like that flavor, or like I said, you could use cheddar if you wanted to. I'm going to do this. What I found is that if I make a little nest, that is helps to prepare the spot for when I put the egg in the second part of the cooking. We need to first cook this at the high heat that will help puff up the puff pastry. Okay. And then we're going to take it out, and then we're going to add our egg, and then we're essentially going to be cooking that right in the oven, which is a great way to do it because that is so time saving. This whole recipe exchange today is all about saving you time if you are entertaining for any one of your holiday meals. And this is perfect for an Easter dinner or any kind of a celebration dinner that you're going to be doing. Okay, this is going to go right into the oven. Okay, and we've got this, this is going to be at about a 400-degree oven. And I've got 10 minutes left on my other recipe, so the timing of this going in is just perfect. So that also gives us some time here. I want to take us, I'm just going to clean this off a little bit. I love having a bench scraper to help clean all this stuff up. I'm going to go ahead and take us back to the website so that you and I can look through my tips and talk about some other options for your sheet pan meals. So, Frances, feel free to interrupt me if anybody has any questions.
Oh, we always have questions. So, on the pan with the fish, did you put either olive oil or cooking spray on the pan before you put the potatoes on?
I did not. And I didn't do it the other night either, and it was fine, but certainly you could. And if you wanted to, you could also spray the fish with an olive oil spray, either before, right before you put it on the pan, or while it's sitting on the pan, you could spray it too. I didn't, and I didn't do it today. So let's see if you like the result. That would be a really good test. What other questions did you have?
Okay, and then you using parchment paper on the puff pastry, yes, but not on the fish. And why wouldn't you use it on the fish? Some people, and potatoes, because some people think it browns the potatoes up better.
Okay, yes. So that's an excellent question, and I know it came up before and I didn't fully answer it. So yes, sheet pan cooking is about browning the food. So with the pastry, that pastry could stick to the bottom because of the nature of pastry. So that's why I did it on the parchment. But you will see at the end, I'll flip one over so you can see the bottom. It actually does brown up beautifully. I think it's really because of the product too. But when you're making a sheet pan meal, you want to use the advantage of that metal surface to help brown your food on the bottom as well. So when would I use a parchment paper is when I know the nature of what I'm doing could become super sticky. So let me just take you, I want to show you another recipe that I have. So let's just go to my website and let me just see. There is a, oh, look at this. Okay, this is fabulous. This, I'm going to make this as an appetizer for my family on Sunday. So this is a sheep pan feta, and I actually roasted the black olives along with the tomatoes. This is all roasted at the same time. It's so beautiful and so delicious. Um, but what I'm looking for is, oh, look at this. Anybody wants to do seafood? Here you go. This is all in one sheet pan, all at one time. Here it is. This is a dessert too. So this is roasted fruit on mascarpone toast. So here I've roasted the fruit and it did not stick to the bottom of the pan. So initially I had used parchment paper, but in the end I decided, oh, it's just so wonderful to have that roasted like that right onto the pan because it gave the fruit more flavor. And I'll tell you, it's amazing how delicious roasted fruit is. And actually, I'm going to be making a bread pudding for our dinner on Sunday. So I think I may do roasted fruit. That would be very nice. But yeah, the only time I've ever done with parchment paper is when I am doing a pastry, not the other ingredients. So everywhere else, I've done it right on the pan. Here's a beautiful sheet pan scrod and vegetables with a garlic ginger sauce. So easy and very authentic tasting. Now, we have a few more minutes, so let's just go over some of these rules. So here's cooking your meal, things to keep in mind. So we talked earlier, somebody mentioned that different sizes matter, right? The smaller the ingredients are chopped, the faster they will cook, okay? And that also helps with the amount of surface area exposed because a lot of exposure of surface area gives you an opportunity to have this roasted crispiness that is quite delicious. And different ingredients cook at different times, right? So we noticed that we had a little over a pound of, each potato was about a pound, right? Um, and then, but their density requires more cooking time. Fish, on the other hand, as a protein, is not nearly as dense as potatoes, so it takes much less cooking time. So we had to divide our cooking time up. So we cooked our potatoes first and then our fish. So just remember that density matters, right? And that is mentioned right here. And then the closer the sheet pan is, the heat sources, the crispier and browner everything will get. So that's something, I've got stuff, the potatoes are at the bottom of the oven still because that heat is going to bounce off the bottom and it's just much warmer down there in my oven. Okay. Um, and then of course we know that the temperature is important. For the equipment, notice I was using the low rimmed sheet pans that allows that hot air to come up over the edge. You don't want to use, for example, a deep sided sheet pan or cooking pan. That would not help you so much in the browning. It would take longer to cook. And then I talk a little bit about the convection setting, so that's there for you. Flavoring, we want to make sure you're adding fats. So that's your olive oil, your other good cooking oils. And also you can use butter too. And that is important. So those are going to give you the moisture, the oil moisture that you need that will help to crisp up your food and give it really good flavors. Herbs and spices, if you're going to be using fresh herbs, you do want to make sure that you have that fat combination, that they get some of that fat on them. So you mix them with your olive oil and when you're coating your ingredients so that they don't burn. If they're dry and they're on the surface, they are going to burn up and fly away. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that you're always seasoning your food. You're just going to love it that much more if you do season it. And then we have choosing your protein. All right. So look, you can cook a bone-in pork chop if you want. Just remember that's going to take a long time. So maybe the pork chop is the longest cooking item on your sheet pan. Maybe you start that 10 to 15 minutes earlier because it's got a bone in it. And then the final, say you're doing that with asparagus. Asparagus only takes 5 minutes to cook in a high heat oven. So you'll put the asparagus in the last 5 minutes of your cooking, right? Thinner cuts of meat will take less time. So chicken tenders, for example, versus a whole chicken breast, tenders are going to cut your cooking time significantly. So you might want to break up your chicken breast. And just as we're talking about chicken tenders or chicken breast, wouldn't that be wonderful with the breadcrumb mixture that we put on our seafoods? Because somebody was asking for ideas. This would be perfect. Both the pork chop and the chicken would be wonderful with that egg wash and then the breadcrumbs. And again, those breadcrumbs, we already had them browned, so they're ready to go. So more details on how to cook different types of proteins here. And then, of course, how to add your vegetables, what types of vegetables work really well, leafy vegetables, etc. And then here are some approximate cooking times. So this is all helpful for you, so that you can make up your own recipes or take a recipe you've seen and redo it, because I don't have broccoli, but I do have asparagus. How would I make that change out? So, okay, we're going to go ahead and take out both of our dishes, and I'm going to bring them over so that you can see. So first of all, I'm going to bring over our fish. So look at how gorgeous that is. And these potatoes, I'm going to take my fork and I'm going to poke them in, and they're perfectly soft. This is fork tender. Our fork goes in and comes out. And then I'm going to press my seafood, my fish. It has a slight bounce to that, just very slight. Okay, I gotta show you this because it's so beautiful. I love to be able to zoom in, and I want to show you. Oops. Now, why did that happen? You never know. You never know with what, let's see. Let's see if I can get this rebooted. Just as I'm about to show you something special, something happens. So let's see if it goes. Nope. Sorry about that. Something has happened where it's decided it's not going to work. So let me see if I can get this rebooted. I apologize for that because this is a critical time. Let me try to reboot this. Oh, I wonder if it's because it got too hot. And that happens sometimes. So let me see. My device just gave up on me, and I think it's because it got a little bit too hot. So let's see if we can open that up. There we go. Okay. So now we have to zoom out and rotate. There we go. Now let's see if I can do this without taking us offline. So here, what I'm looking at, and I don't know if you can see that, I'm going to zoom in again. Look at all that moisture. You see that water coming out here? That is a perfectly cooked piece of fish. It's got a little bit of give, right? But it's got this beautiful water here, okay? So that is lovely, and that's what I'm hoping for when I have something cooked well. Okay, now that is our fish dish, okay? And we'll
They
plate
have
that
a
up.
question about your fish.
Yes.
In the recipe, you said to cut it into some equal sizes, and you use.
Mhm.
So are you looking at that as two equal sizes, or?
So yes and no. If I'm looking at this in equal density, right? So they're both the same thickness. And in order to do that, I had to fold that tail under. Could I have cut them both, to be that same size? Yes, I could have, but then I would have had this little strip of a piece, and what the heck would I do with that? So I'm leaving them as they are, so that they cooked in the same amount of time. That's the key. And also I wasn't wasting any fish. So that's where I am with that. Now let's go ahead and get out so I don't overcook my puff pastry. We're going to take this out and I'm going to show you where we are right now. Here is with our cooked madame, okay? And we still have to add our eggs and then we're going to come back. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to go right in the middle and I'm making just a little bit of a hole, right? Almost like a nest that's going to hold my cracked egg. Okay. And the idea is that when I crack my egg in here, I don't want it to spill over the edge. So I'm just moving the ham and the cheese to the side. And we still have about another 10 minutes to cook this. Now this one is not going to be so easy because I can see that this is leaning a little bit. This puffed up really high and this did not. So I'm just going to try to build that up just to hold my egg in. And I have a feeling that my convection oven blows the hot air this way. And so this puffs up a little bit high. So I probably should have turned my puff pastry around in the middle of the cooking. Now you can use a small egg, a medium egg. I happen to have large eggs. So that's what I'm using. You can see it's spilling over to the side a little bit. Again, it's just because my one side cooked up. Now, what I did last night is I took an eggshell. I just propped this up while I was cooking. So don't think that just because I am a chef that I get everything perfect. That is far from the case. And sometimes I I flub a little bit, right? And also just to let you know, again, I'm just going to prop that up a little bit during the cooking, is that a lot of the recipes that you see on the internet, and they look so beautiful, and you're like, why didn't mine come out as beautiful as that? Don't forget that the person who is putting that recipe out on the internet, like me, is giving you the most beautiful picture that they've taken. They may have cooked that dish 5 or 6 times or 10 times to get that beautiful shot. And that's what they're going to show you. I'm just popping this right into the oven very carefully. And I'm going to set my timer. I did this the other night. So I know that 10 minutes seems to be a good time for me. So yeah, so I don't want you to be discouraged, but just now you saw a little bit of, oh, how do I get it from flopping all over off to one side? So two things about that recipe that I realized is number one, my oven doesn't cook as evenly on all sides. And I think everybody's oven has its own quirkiness. So I really probably should have turned that tray at 5 minutes to make sure that they all puffed up in the same speed, to the same amount. And then of course the other thing is if if you have to improvise. So I took those eggshells and stuck them under there to lift up one side so that that egg sat comfortably right in the center. Does it work? It does. Yeah, just make sure to remove those egg yolk or eggshells.
We have another question, Liz.
Yes, Francis.
What you were cooking. So have you ever tried it with turkey or chicken or any other meat for the puff pastries? And if so, what did you think was good? Turkey?
Uh, look, if you're gonna, what you want to do is whatever your favorite sliced meat is would be beautiful on that. If you don't like ham, don't don't use it. If you don't want any meat, you don't have to use it. Here's the beauty of this recipe. There's so many layers to it that you could simply remove. If you just like the idea of having a fried egg, essentially, in a puff pastry, you could just puff up the pastry with the holes in the middle. You saw how I broke the pastry a little bit, crack the egg in, finish it in the oven. You know what I thought would be really nice is to do that with everything seasoning. So when I egg washed the pastry, you could put everything seasoning on there, and that would be beautiful as well. And then that would go nicely. You could, if you wanted to, cook up, um, with cheese, the egg, and then at the end, excuse me, take take it out of the oven and you could put smoked salmon right on top of the egg and serve it that way. And then when you cut into it, that beautiful egg yolk would come out. So there's so many different ways you can do this. Those puff pastries are really great too because you could make them with no seasoning on them, right? Just the egg wash. You could put a little bit of sugar on instead, cook them up for 10 minutes, take them out, tamp them down, and you could put a beautiful jam in there if you wanted to with a little clump of cream cheese and then pop them in the oven. And then the jam bubbles up in the next 10 minutes and that cream cheese kind of melts. And then you would have almost like a little cream cheese pastry. So they're so versatile. I always keep a box of these in the freezer just in case I have a last minute dessert to make, which my kids always tease me that somehow I managed to pull out a cake. Do you remember last month we did the Instant Pot cheesecake? Well, guess what? We had last minute guests over for dinner. Oh no, I was going to a dinner party and they asked me to bring dessert. Guess who pulled that little extra cheesecake out of the freezer and brought it to dinner? And everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing I've ever had. It's just nice to have these little things that you can pull out whenever necessary. What other questions do you have for me?
Um, could you use a silicone mat in place of parchment paper? And do you
Sure.
ever put your pans in the oven before you put the food on them, like with the fish and the potatoes, so they kind of brown up a little more?
Yep. So you can use silicone if you want. That I'm sure that would be fine. I've never used that, but you could certainly do that if that's something that you're used to. Um, and yes, the idea of getting your pan hot first is a good idea. I think you could do that for almost anything, but certainly, especially if you're doing like a pork chop or a chicken, breast or something like that, it helps to brown it up. So take advantage, get that in there and get it nice and hot, almost like a fry pan.
Can you
Um,
prepare any of this ahead and then um, finish it last minute, or how
yep.
could you keep it holding?
Well, I mean, you could certainly do this and then reheat it if you want in the oven. You could do that. As I mentioned before, you could get your fish all coated and then, you know, leave that in the refrigerator until you're ready to pop it on the cooking pan. You can also do your potatoes, at least cut them up. You could actually, if you really wanted to, cook them up sooner, but see how we did this, and I didn't have to do any of that. Now look at how beautifully this is coming right off of the pan. So that is a wonderful dish. And what I realized is that I don't have a lemon wedge, but let me see if I have any greens. Oh, I know I have some scallion here, which would be nice. We're going to use that on the next dish. Let me get some greens. What other questions do we have, honey?
One other question was, how did you get to the sheet pan meals again?
If you go to my website, so why don't I'll walk you through that again. So we're going to go, so if we start out on my website, you're going to go where it says Food and Fun to the recipe blog. And for all of my sheet pan meals, with the exception of the ones for the class, on my recipe blog, you go down to the side and then it says sheet pan meals. And then there's all, a whole bunch of ideas along with the tips. If you just want to get to our recipes from today, you go over here where I've created for AARP classes, all of our recipes have their links directly there. So here is our sheet pan fish and chips, and here is our croque madame. So there you go.
Well, everybody's
All
been
right.
saying how you're making them so hungry now.
I know, and I have to say I'm really excited to see. There we go, just a little bit of green. They're so easy to make, and I'll tell you, for anyone who has a retiring spouse who is interested in cooking, I have to say, I think that my husband would agree that the sheet pan meals has allowed him so much success in his cooking that when you have success, you want to do more of it. And when somebody is there to appreciate it, it's so much better. So I always recommend. Now I'm going to take out my eggs just because I want them a little bit less done. So these have just a little jiggle on them and they cooked up beautifully. So let's get these onto a plate and then we'll garnish these up. Look at how gorgeous that is. Now these you do want to serve hot, but here's my little, oh, here it is. But we had this the other night and I had leftovers. And so what I did was I took my leftovers and I just put them in the fridge. I wrapped them up, put them in a fridge of the Coque Madame. And then the next day I took two pieces and I made a sandwich. I put some sliced avocado in the middle and served it to my husband. And he was like, oh, this is a great sandwich. So, it's just so versatile. And so it's really just a beautiful, beautiful dish. And imagine this on a buffet. You can actually just put the sheet pan right onto the buffet with a knife. I'm sorry, with a spatula, and it will be perfect for everybody. And here's a little bit of scallion on there. And then we would add a little bit of salt and pepper. But there are our two dishes. You can make a nice remoulade with this, with what do we call it? A little tartar sauce would be delicious. I just served it as it was. I would put a lemon wedge with it. I ran out of lemons at the last minute. So both of these are super easy, very approachable, and wonderful for leftovers. So don't worry about that. And Francis, before we go, we're right on time. Do we have any other questions?
If you don't have panko breadcrumbs, can you just use regular breadcrumbs?
Oh, of course. Yes. Absolutely. But I generally keep both in my pantry, but yeah, don't let that little detail stop you. I love how the panko looks, but they're both equally interchangeable.
All right, thanks, Liz. This
Okay,
was great. Everybody was really getting hungry watching this. So
good.
today's cook-along demonstration is one of many common events offerings provided by AARP New Hampshire. You can visit us at aarp.org/New Hampshire to learn of our other virtual events. And if you're interested in volunteering for AARP New Hampshire, you can go to nhaarp@aarp.org. So our next cooking class, I put it in the chat, is coming up May 16th, and it's going to be how to make the best fruit pies. And that's good for me because I've been struggling a little bit with pie crust. So thanks, Liz, and it's looking beautiful, and happy Easter.
Thank you. Happy holidays to everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Bye, everyone.